As I'm on the floor, with my hands behind my back, somebody's twisting my arm and repeatedly hitting me.
What happens to Nevada's troubled children? For DeMonte Richardson, it's a story that ends in bruises and a battered face. But his story, just like our months of reporting, starts in rooms like this one, where young teens sit in front of a judge. We've been looking at Nevada's juvenile justice system for more than a year. We've watched dozens of teenagers sentenced to youth camps and detention centers, some sent by Clark County thousands of feet above Las Vegas to Spring Mountain Youth Camp. Others shipped hundreds of miles away to northern Nevada to a century-old correctional campus called the Nevada Youth Training Center. The rest will spend 6 to 9 month sentences at places called Caliente or Summit View. It's a system designed by politicians, paid for by you, with one goal: take kids that commit crimes and fix them. Rehabilitate them, make them whole. What we learned is that the people who oversee the system have no idea if it's working. The district attorney in charge of juvenile court told us that in May 2018.
From my office, for the district attorney's office, to the public defender's office, to the Department of Corrections and mental health services, we all know it's needed because we don't know whether or not we're improving our community or the lives of children. It's all just speculation.
It's all speculation. Nevada doesn't track recidivism, the number of kids who come out of detention centers we send them to and commit another crime later on. Nevada's known about that problem for years. It's tried to fix it. In 2017, the Clark County Commission approved $7 million for a new computer system that would finally link the juvenile courts and detention centers together, connect the whole thing to the adult system. Part of a statewide push to get that system, called Caseload Pro, into every court and correctional center. 2 years later, close to $1 million spent, that computer system is only partially working. It doesn't collect data from the state's 2 largest counties. Wondering why? So is the state. This is the Juvenile Justice Oversight Commission, a committee put in place by Governor Brian Sandoval. We were there in the summer of 2019 when they decided to ask Tyler Technologies, the company the state contracted with, to sit down and explain themselves, explain why it isn't working yet.
They need to step up and start producing, and we need to get this moving. And I think your suggestion to get them here in front of us, to get them tied down to some realistic deadlines, needs to happen.
That next meeting never happened. All meetings were canceled. The commission couldn't meet for almost 5 months because Nevada's new governor, Steve Sisolak, didn't assign new members. It's something that has to happen before the commission can finish their job. The next meeting is scheduled for early 2020. So the machine keeps moving. Kids keep getting in trouble. They keep standing in front of Judge William Voy and getting sentenced to correctional centers or youth camps. 6 to 9 months later, maybe they commit a crime, maybe they don't. We don't know. But a curious thing happens when you don't know what works. Broken things don't get fixed.
They didn't tell me I was going to get moved.
We first heard about DeMonte Richardson in July. Of course, we didn't know his name then. We were handed a manila envelope. Inside were photos and a CD. This is DeMonte Richardson, just 17 years old, on one of his last days at Summit View. We're only seeing these images now because of a chance discovery a year ago by a man who is not comfortable showing his face because he still works in the state. How you came across that incident?
Sure. I was involved in reviewing OC spray incidents and some 40 cases since it had been started at that facility and also the Elko facility, and came upon a folder that was not marked, not identified, and in the folder was a disc, and we wondered what it was, so we put the disc on and saw an incident where this young man was being brought back into the facility after being apprehended from the escape.
In March of 2018, DeMonte was an inmate here. On the 28th, he escaped. He ran out of the back of that gym and over that wall. The story of what happens next is different depending on who you ask. And our quest for the truth about that story taught us a lot about what happens behind that fence.
It's a bad prison at best.
We wanted to find DeMonte. It wasn't hard. He is 19 now and in prison. Not long after he was released for the escape, he was back. We reached out on the prison's online messaging system and waited. DeMonte's story, one that begins with getting released from juvenile detention only to get in trouble again, is one we've seen before and one that we will come back to. But another young teen's tale is marked with balloons and candles and the tears of friends. Aaron Rodriguez's story began the same way. It ended on Pecos Road, where the 18-year-old boxer was shot and killed walking home. He just finished his 9-month sentence at the county's Spring Mountain Youth Camp, released to the same neighborhood with the same people and the same habits that got him in trouble. The former gang member told us just how hard it was not to fall back.
It's easy to fall off, it's easy to commit crimes, it's easy to be in jail because you don't have to do nothing. All you have to do is focus on yourself. Yeah. But it takes a true gangster to be out here handling your priorities, taking care of your family, making sure you're straight, making sure you're doing the right thing.
The killing of Aaron Rodriguez has not been solved. A 14-year-old kid has been charged in the shooting. Police believe it was all gang-related. His trial is expected to begin in 2020. While we waited to hear from DeMonte, we were learning more about where he tried to escape from. Summit View Youth Training Center. DeMonte had been pepper sprayed by corrections officers and came back from his escape badly bruised. He was writhing in pain. He wasn't the only one. Our investigation found other incidents. For years, the state's juvenile justice system has been underfunded and understaffed. In 2017, Summit View spent more than $600,000 in overtime. An audit the state ordered found that because of attrition, shortages, low pay, and a lack of state support, staff were in survival mode. That's their words. That culture of exhaustion is exactly what we heard from a former parole officer who now volunteers to help young gang members turn their lives around.
Even if you like doing the job, you're still going to be burned out after a while. I went to Summit View and I wanted to be there. I like helping kids. I like that demographic of kids, at-risk youth is what we call them. You get tired after a while. So that's across the board, happens to a lot of my other coworkers as well. They all experience the same things. I know coworkers that did easily like 80, 90 even. I know one coworker did 126 hours in 1 week.
Anthony Brinkley worked at Summit View for close to 2 years. He quit after, well, he won't say the name of the inmate, but after an incident involving a teenager on the same date we have listed as DeMonte's escape.
Ethically, it didn't sit well with me how the events that transpired of my coworkers getting the kid and bringing him back. Whatever transpired that I don't know specifically, I was not there, but it just didn't sit well with me.
Staffing was so short that Summit View couldn't meet the federally required standards called PREA, or the Prison Rape Elimination Act, a policy designed to protect kids from abuse by making sure staff can keep an eye on them. Without PREA, the state risked federal dollars coming in, so to try and get the ratio of staff to juveniles down, Summit View made a brutal decision. When there weren't enough staff, they would lock kids in their rooms, putting them in solitary confinement. If they were in their room, they didn't count towards PREA. We don't know who at the state knew that young teens were being locked away, but the policy was so openly talked about behind the barbed wire that the kids inside were used to it.
If they didn't have enough staff, we were down. Kids acting up, we were down.
Chaston is 16. He spent 9 months in Summit View. It was his second time at a juvenile facility, and the second time worked. He graduated from the program and hasn't looked back. What did you think was the best part of Summit View that worked the most for you?
my education.
Yeah.
Probably the thing that helped me get through what I had to get through.
He's now part of a group that helps young men stay on track. But when we talked to him about Summit View, conversation quickly went to those days and nights in a small room.
It's more like a mental game, it just depends on the person you are. It's some people like me, I can't be in somewhere for a long period of time. I gotta keep moving. So it's kind of hard. Most kids just sit and read their books or we'll talk to each other through the doors. But if everybody was angry that day, it's pretty quiet.
Right.
It's all to yourself, and then sometimes it's irritating when it's loud.
The only real evidence we have of that confinement came from leaked emails. In March of 2019, an email went to 2 deputy administrators with the Division of Child and Family Services. That's the state division that runs youth facilities. I'm sure you're aware of the increased room confinements in February, it reads. 112 of the 207 in that month alone were for PREA ratio violations. That email was from the state's PREA coordinator. Summit View seemed to be becoming toxic. An email was sent to Summit View staff. A staff member had been trying to report situations and concerns about coworkers anonymously. We are obliged to communicate to a supervisor immediately, it reads. Inside the state system, some believe the culture was changing.
Based on my experience, that DCFS operates under a culture of thou shalt not report, thou shalt cover up, thou shalt lie, and that covers both employees as well as the youth in our care.
Well, we kept pushing the state for more documents. Another email went out, forwarded to us. Overtime, low pay, lack of support, Summit View was becoming a pipe bomb. A decision from 2017 became the fuse. It was then the state allowed officers to use oleoresin capicum, or pepper spray.
At first, a lot of my coworkers were real hesitant to use it. So they were like, well, they weren't sure of the actual policy on the spray. Will the administration back me up if I do use the spray? So these are all questions in their mind at that time.
Did they get comfortable using it?
Yeah, I would have to say maybe a little later on, after about a year.
We wanted to see how common it was and when and why it was being used. We asked the state for copies of incident reports, the paperwork officers have to file every time a juvenile inmate is sprayed and every time an officer uses force. It took months, but the reports finally started coming in. By our count, officers at Summit View used force on teenagers 100 times in 2018 alone. Noted on dozens of reports, the officers broke policy by doing it. In November of 2018, one teenager was sprayed with OC spray, then had a spit mask placed over their face. It forced the spray to stay on. According to the report, no OC spray was warranted at all. Other young men were put in restraints for horseplaying in the gym. An October 2018 report details how a youth was being carried by their arms and legs when they had a seizure in the courtyard. In June of that same year, just before 7 p.m., a teenager made verbal threats to staff from the other side of his door. Staff sprayed pepper spray into his room. Chasten remembers that.
It was pretty crazy. I mean, it came in my room too, so the smell of it was in my room. It's just like a choke, you just can't breathe.
Dozens of use of force incidents were okayed by supervisors, but we have questions about them too. State policy is that each incident has to be recorded on camera, but time and time again, video was missing. Often, entire sections of reports were missing, but the uses were still okayed.
We put them into conditions that I've seen that, quite frankly, just affirm more trauma.
The reports give us a look at the officer's side, but they never include interviews with the juveniles. They tell a different story. In 2019, an anonymous survey went out to 10 Summit View inmates. 7 said they had been sprayed. I have been sprayed twice. Staff put baby soap in my eyes and mouth. I've been sprayed 4 times because I got into a fight with another youth. I was not decontaminated. I got sprayed 5 times in 6 months. My hands were tied. I asked for help staff refused. When you look back and remember those moments, remember that smell of OC spray, remember hearing that you gotta go back in the room again, just facing the nothingness, what kind of memories come back to that?
It'd be mostly anger. Would be the emotion I felt going back towards that, because some kids didn't deserve what happened. Some did, some didn't. So I think some things were taken to the extreme. It just irritates me to see that was going on there.
I wanted to see inside Summit View myself, and after about a month of negotiations, I was allowed in without any of the stuff in the truck. The state won't let cameras inside. They would let me bring in an audio recorder, which paints a picture of life on the other side of the barbed wire.
I'm going to hold your ID, and then when you leave, we exchange.
The first thing you notice when you walk into Summit View is this place looks like a prison, and the man in charge, Walt Pesterfield, knows it. There were 32 kids inside when we toured. Pesterfield says the goal is to get every one of them back home a changed man.
Our job is to try to help these young men be productive citizens when they leave.
Pesterfield took over in 2018. He talks a lot about culture change, how Summit View and the staff are changing their ways. But take a walk and you can see just how many hurdles are in his. There were 32 inmates when we got there. School was in session, but not everyone was in class. One teenager was in his room on suicide watch. 5 students were sitting at a table because of disciplinary problems, essentially suspended from a prison school. 2 others couldn't go to class because they were already graduated high school.
The one you met is, well, actually both of them right here sitting at the table. They're both high school graduates.
What do you do all day when you're a high school graduate?
Well, they're supposed to be working, but it's too hot to have them working.
There are no programs other than that school. None. The dorms are small. Thin halls are lined with cells. When Las Vegas is hot, students aren't allowed to exercise or play outside. They are allowed to cram into the gym, but there is another problem. There's no air conditioner. If you want to beat the heat with a trip to the water fountain, more bad news. Water fountains aren't refrigerated here. In the late spring and summer, the water that pours out is too hot to drink. This is a photo given to us from someone inside. The fountain isn't clean. Teens are given water bottles, but we didn't see anyone carrying one. 75% of the inmates here are on psychotropic medication, but the state hasn't had a director of nursing for the juvenile system in more than half a year. Our man inside tells us nurses have been told to cut back on overtime. Dozens of teenage boys, most on drugs for mental illness, all with behavior issues, stuck inside small dorms, many not allowed to leave for school, thirsty and hot. It's a recipe for disaster. We were making progress with DeMonte. His attorneys reached out to us. He wanted to talk, but getting into a Nevada prison is easy for a criminal. It's nearly impossible for anyone else. They haven't allowed television cameras in to interview an inmate in years. It didn't take long for them to say no to us. Our fight for access took us to the governor's office. Finally, after months of waiting, we were allowed in. Why did you want to talk to us?
Because I wanted to have a chance to explain what happened to me.
DeMonte Richardson is known at High Desert Prison as inmate 1219965. He's in the middle of a 2 to 5 year sentence for battery and conspiracy to rob someone.
I did a couple things that I shouldn't have, that I learned from, that I regret, that I don't want to do again.
He was arrested and charged in January of 2019. Not even a year earlier, he was in Summit View. We don't know why. His juvenile records are sealed. When we asked him why he'd started getting in trouble, his story was familiar. He was 14 or 15 when his mom and dad separated. He moved with his brother and mother to Las Vegas. He filled that father-shaped hole in his life with older guys on the street around his neighborhood.
I think my motivation just came from, I don't know, the streets. Older people that I know.
The 6-foot-tall tattooed teenager doesn't look anything like the kid we first saw in pictures. This is DeMonte on his last days at Summit View after he tried to escape.
I was in the gym, and I kind of just said, forget it, right? I ran out the back door. I hopped over the gate, you know, made it over, and I started running.
Before we let DeMonte tell you his version of what happened, let's tell you what Summit View's version is. We found it buried in those reports we fought to get. No names, but dates match. According to staff here, on March 29th of 2018, at 4 p.m., a youth, presumably DeMonte, locked staff out of the gym and took off. 4 minutes later, staff were closing in. DeMonte took off in his detention jumpsuit through an office park near Summit View. It took staff 20 minutes in a van to catch up to him. Once they did, DeMonte fought. He punched officers and resisted. Officers used their OC spray to gain control. Within minutes, he was placed in a van. At 4:35, he's back at Summit View. 5 minutes after, he was seen by nurses, and by 4:50, the spray had been washed off. So that is the story Summit View broke down, but it is not at all the story DeMonte told us, and it is not at all what we saw when we looked at the prying eyes of security cameras.
As I'm on the floor with my hands behind my back, somebody's twisting my arm and repeatedly hitting me and rubbing my face in like the dirt. Somebody hit me in my jaw. As we were riding back towards Summit View, 4 people were in the car with me. 4 staff. The OC spray was burning my face. It was hard. I'm just rocking back and forth like, because it burned. Somebody in the backseat said, you missed your turn. And the guy in the front seat said, it's okay, just let him burn.
We don't have any video of officers catching up to DeMonte. The body cameras that were supposed to capture the arrest were not given to us. But we do have the video of DeMonte when he's brought back to the intake room at Summit View. He's placed into a small room by himself at 4:35, like the report says. But at 4:40, when the report says he's checked by medical staff, DeMonte is alone, writhing in pain. It would be another 10 minutes, 4:50, before nurses walk in. The report says that is when DeMonte is decontaminated from spray, but according to the video, DeMonte would sit another 5 minutes before he was walked into a shower. He is in that shower, out of view from the camera, for 20 minutes. So if the report isn't accurate, what actually happened? We can begin to piece that together with the help of DeMonte and our source. At 4:35, DeMonte is carried into the intake room. He's visibly uneasy. 4 officers stay with him in a small dark room. We don't have audio from the camera. DeMonte remembers what they said.
They were threatening me. They were saying, you going to prison, your mom's going to prison. They just telling me I ain't nothing, I'm worthless.
Over the next 60 seconds, while 3 officers appear to smile and laugh, a 4th officer can be seen repeatedly jerking DeMonte up and down, at times leaning over him, before jerking him violently again.
He just got mad and started swinging me around in the room.
At 4:39, that same officer enters the room again. Another officer blocks the doorway while DeMonte is again pushed against the wall. 10 minutes later, officers appear to loosen his restraints just before nurses enter the room. At 5:38, more than an hour after he is brought in, DeMonte is walked out with his back to the camera.
The employees that were involved in those incidents were all there and nothing seemed to happen to them. The administration at the facility seemed to know nothing about the subsequent incident.
18-year-old DeMonte in restraints for more than an hour, his face covered in pepper spray. So who did know? Who does know? What's being done about it? One man knows, the head of the Division of Child and Family Services, Ross Armstrong.
I can't talk about specific HR or instances, but that is not an accurate description of what occurred.
The aftermath or what occurred?
That we don't get rid of people who are not following the policy.
Ross Armstrong has been in the DCFS system for years, first as a deputy administrator, now as the man in charge. He will not talk about DeMonte's case. So let's talk about Summit View and those pages of broken policies, of confinements and sprays. Why do we OC spray kids?
So the OC spray can be used to a control situation that's out of control, like a riot, or if there's an assault where there's a threat of substantial bodily harm.
Is it only used for out-of-control situations?
That's our policy states it is. So if it's used outside of that, then then that would be a violation of our policy.
We got incident reports, as you know, about OC spray use and use of force, and the vast majority of them were out of policy, were not in policy. That was for 2018. Concerning?
That is concerning.
Why do we spray kids when they're in room confinement or inside the room?
That we should not be doing.
It happens, though.
It has happened, and then it's addressed with the staff.
How is it addressed?
So there are a number of, depending on the violation, anything from an additional coaching on how to do a use of force for any use of force situation, up to and including termination.
How often are people terminated for spraying kids?
Specifically for spraying kids, I would have to take a look at the numbers. I think that there's probably not. I would have to take a look at that.
This is what some juveniles reported in a survey that went out to them in DCFS. One said, "I was sprayed 4 times for fighting. I have not been decontaminated in any of those times." Another said, "I was sprayed 5 times in 6 months. Once my hands were tied behind my back for 10 minutes. I asked for help, but staff refused." None of those incident reports about those specific incidents had any sort of request for more investigation or some sort of punishment for the staff member.
I can't speak to specific instances, but that would be a violation of the policy and would need to be addressed.
We don't know how those violations are addressed. HR records are sealed from the public, but what about this place? The lack of programs, the water, the air conditioner, the lack of staff, the forced overtime. Ross Armstrong says he asked the state for help for those. He asked the state for money. He didn't get much. Is there something we can put in place to rectify those problems over some of them?
Well, one of the ones is staffing. So the legislature, although we didn't get all of our staffing, did give us additional staffing, which should assist with providing that quality programming.
Any belief that we're really going to put up the money for it? They have it so far. I mean, the state has it so far.
In my mind, selfishly, I think every government agency will say, "Oh yeah, give us more money. We need more money," and there's a very thoughtful process in terms of building the budget. But if we do juvenile justice right and invest appropriately in juvenile justice, then we can save those dollars from being spent down the road.
We've been looking at Nevada's juvenile justice system for more than a year now. We've seen success. We've seen failure. Young men wanting to lead others and young lives lost. But everyone we talk to agrees we have to do better.
We have the ingredients to make it work, but we've got a state system that's totally disconnected to that philosophy.
So what does Nevada do now? It's a question we can't answer. It's as unknown as the future of all those kids staring down a judge waiting to hear what happens next. And for now, we wait with them.